I am very excited by this talk. So will you welcome to the stage Paul, whose transparent media buying platform, iTech, did I say that right? I'm dyslexic,
yes,
rubbish.
thank you.
But also a passionate ethics and diversity advocate. So big round of applause.
Thank you, everyone. So I'll introduce myself. I'm 52. I'm white, but with a little bit of tan, but it's mostly fake. I'm middle-aged, and I work for a tech company. At least I suppose I'm not a creative director in some ways. That's a good thing. The point being is that I'm probably everything that's the problem within technology. But I'm hoping in the next 15 minutes I can tell you how we can change this, because I think it's really important. I have two kids, one at 18, one 21, who both want to work in the creative industries. But they're also the generation that has grown up with this tech, and it has affected them in different ways. One of them actually has struggled with it very heavily, and that's something that I'm very aware of because I live with it daily, and the other hasn't. But they both want to work in this industry. But in order for this industry to grow, one of the things we've got to understand is the technology that you put your great creative onto. And increasingly, that is a variety of things, whether it's Google's YouTube, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Snap, whatever it happens to be. And as we were discussing earlier, if there's an inherent bias in how those technologies are built, then there's a challenge. And that's what I want to talk to you about in the next 15 minutes. So the first thing is we believe as a business that ethics and diversity are together. You can't have one without the other. And over the last 20 years, and particularly the last 10 years, the growth in digital marketing has come at a cost. And we've started to see some of that cost, particularly this year, but also throughout last year, whether it's Cambridge Analytica or whatever else it happens to be. And we have a responsibility for our kids and for our future generations to make sure that that doesn't get out of control. So that's our belief. iTech is a tech platform, and I'll explain our story right at the end of this session. I don't want to talk about us now. I want to talk about how we got to where we got to, and how things need to change. Now, for those of you, I don't know, how many people read this book? Ooh, 2. Can I recommend that as many of you can read this book? This is one of the best books about Silicon Valley you will read for the next 2 or 3 years, I would think. Emily Chang is the Bloomberg host of Bloomberg Technology in San Francisco, and she's worked in this industry for a long time. And what she's done is put a real focus on what has happened in Silicon Valley over the last 50 years, and particularly around the role of women and the role of men in terms of how that's affected everything. And I think it's a great shame this book came out sort of at the end of February. It probably didn't get the coverage it deserved because there were a lot of other things going on around that time. But it gets to the heart of the issue that we have in technology companies. And I run a technology company, and I have to deal with this daily. The first thing that she talks about is the history of technology and why we've got these challenges. And one of the things that's really interesting is, for those of you who don't know the sort of history of tech, and I didn't know much about it until I read this, is that in the early days of technology companies, it was generally a fairly even split between men and women. Men did the hardware element, the shiny bits on the outside, the computers, the whole hard bit, and then the software was often done by women. However, over the 50s and 60s, things started to change. And one of the things that changed was the fact that there was a company who did a personality test. Now, we've sort of been there today, this year with personality tests, but this is true. They did a personality test on the right type of people to do computer engineering. And they interviewed 1,300 odd people, of which 1,200-ish were men. Not the most balanced bit of research we were talking about, I think, perhaps. And it came out with this theory about what made the best engineers for computing. And the best engineers, they said, were people who were problem solvers. Fair enough, that makes sense. But the second trait that they came up with is this one that we now perpetuate all the way through our culture, which is the one about the nerd. And it was about the fact that the best people for computer engineering were people who didn't like people. And for the last 30, 40 years, since we've been developing the internet and all this great technology that we all use daily, that has been an abiding strategy for hiring engineering people in this world. And it hasn't changed, despite all the things that have come out. And therefore, we as a group and a society have a challenge here, because that is, this is a small group of people who've got a particular view of the world and a particular way of doing things. And people who don't like people, bear that in mind. Anyway, beyond that, obviously, we've had fantastic growth. And obviously, all these companies came through there. And I remember also when I was at Omnicom a while back, I took some clients about 6 or 7 years ago to around Silicon Valley and to all the headquarters of all the companies. And one of the things I did notice is that the dominance of male men there was very high. And it was quite an interesting culture. It felt a bit, it was a bit like an extension of a university, but a campus university. And there was a sense that that was sort of wrong. And then in my career, just after that, I went to work for Apple. So I have had experience of how all these companies work. And I think there are challenges in all these businesses. And let me explain how we need to move forward. So let's have a look at the current state of diversity after all these changes. Now, I could have picked a whole heap of people who are in charge of technology businesses. I just happened to choose these guys. I'm not making any judgments about these people. They just all happen to be blokes. And actually, it's not a hugely diverse group. Tim Cook up there is the only one who's openly declared being different in the sense that he's obviously gay. But beyond that, it's a bunch of white guys, basically. Now, that's fine, because that's the way it is. These are the guys who founded the businesses. But to some degree, there is also a challenge with the founders, because the founders define the culture. And I think if we really want to change the culture in technology, we have to have more diverse leadership, because that's going to be a problem. Mark Zuckerberg, great engineer, great sort of entrepreneur, still controls 60% of Facebook stock. So whatever happens, he's still in charge. And that may be a problem. Tim Cook, I've worked a little bit with that organization, and I know that he's very, very passionate about changing Apple's culture, but it's taking a long time. But he's certainly, out of the ones I know of, making the biggest effort. If you look at Amazon, 96% of their C-suite are men. So there are some challenges in the leadership of these companies if we really want to get the diversity that we need to go forward. And then these are some figures. Now, these are figures from 2017. I'm not going to go into detail on these. It gives you an indication of the gender bias within these organizations. And the thing that it doesn't show is the gender bias within engineering, because that's the thing that is a real problem. And obviously, there's a couple of reasons for that. We talked about looking for these people who don't like people, and these geeky elements, and that's been a challenge, and therefore you end up with the same type of people going into university who go through because they want to be engineers. But these companies probably could attract virtually anybody in the world to work for them, and yet there's still a challenge when it comes to diversity, and that is something that we should be looking at always. If you look at women executives in tech, it's not great either. And that's, I think, the biggest challenge for us to deal with. We need more women in technology. It's very interesting. If you look at the history of Google, Google had a very pro-women approach early on. And then it sort of went off the rails a bit over the last few years. No particular reason for that, probably just a sheer scale of growing, and therefore they just took whatever they could do from there. So, that's where we are. That's what we've got to change. Now, how can you change this organization or these organizations? I think the biggest thing is we need to bring ethics back into technology. We need to be sitting there talking about why technology is beneficial to it, and therefore how does it work. The problem at the moment, we've got lots of technology, it's just technology for technology's sake, and no one pulling back on this. And that's a real initiative that we have. So when I joined my company, we were just like those guys. We were male-dominated, quite geeky in some areas, all that type of stuff. And I love my programmers, but they do like their geeky image as well. Some of them play up to it. They deliberately go out and have loads of Red Bull stacked by their desk for whatever reason. And they like pot noodles as well. I can't help, whatever. But I wanted to change some things. So what we did is, for a technology platform like us, this was pretty scary. We decided to do several things. The first thing we decided to do is pursue an ethical view on how we used our technology. So we share everything, we share all the data of what we do with our clients, so we do not take a risk, I guess, with anything. Everyone sees what our margin is, what we're doing with our algorithms, and everything else. The second thing we did was we put in flexible working. For a company of 60 people who run a platform, that is a scary decision in some ways, but it's been fantastic. Why has it been fantastic? One is we've got a much happier workforce, and two, we can start attracting women engineers and stuff who want more flexibility, because one of the challenges with engineering is that perception that it's always on and it's always 24 hours and you go home when the bus goes home if you're, wherever it happens to be. And that's made a big difference to our business. So with full flexible working, that includes me, everybody in the company does flexible working. There is no debate about it. We have lots of very positive views with regard to women coming back to work as well. And to that extent, we've now got 35% of our team, of about 60, are women. 45% of our team at leadership level are women. And 33% of our board of 6, so 2 out of 6, are women too. And that makes a difference to the way we behave and the way we want to do it. So if a small company like us can do it, which is a damn sight less attractive to work for than Facebook or Google or anything else, then I think our challenge is going to be, how do we get those companies to do the same thing? Because we'll end up with a better outcome. And that better outcome is good for all of us, and a good place for us to develop our creativity and make sure that it gets to all the right people. I'll just finish on one story about my daughter. My daughter, because I think this demonstrates how social media and some of these tech platforms have been impacted on her, but yet she still is quite strong despite that. She went through 2 or 3 years of a real tough time mentally because of what she was dealing with on social media. And then recently, she's got a fair degree of anxiety, so she's in front of 200 people. She's at a school assembly, and there's about 200 kids there. And one of the masters comes up and starts talking about sport and the fact that the boys' sports team have done fantastically well. She puts her hand up, and she keeps her hand up for about 5 minutes. And eventually she gets asked what she wants to talk about. And she said, and consider this girl, and I'm very proud of her, but she's got a very strong anxiety because of what's gone through her last 5 years. Said, the biggest challenge, sir, well, the problem, sir, is you're not talking about the girls. So the reason I tell you that story is that I think it's important that we understand the impact of technology so that it doesn't destroy people in the wrong ways. And we are not there yet. It's been a very long journey, but we need to think about the unintended consequences of all this fantastic tech. Luckily, with my daughter, she's in a great place and she's got the balls to stand up and do stuff, and most of her A-level art and graphics is a fairly extreme feminist view of various things, which is fantastic. But she's got there despite the tech, and that shouldn't be the case. So we need to change things. Thank you.